Hello, I'm Maggie Groves, and today I will be doing my presentation on issues facing youth in the criminal justice system. So to get right into it, youth in the United States face many of the same challenges as adults when it comes to the criminal justice system, and this includes things such as drugs and sex work too. However, they require different solutions in deterrence and rehabilitation. Youth involvement in drugs and sex work is widely impacted by their environment and their socioeconomic status, and the Big Brothers Big Sisters of America program is one of the ways reform is working to decrease this exposure. So today I will be talking about the two main issues of sex work and drug-related crimes that youth are involved in, particularly minority youth, because they're disproportionately susceptible to these types of crimes. And I say that because unfortunately they are targeted by adults and by non-minority communities to kind of take the brunt of this, especially in things such as sex work. So when you look at the table 10.4 on page 471 of Colors of Justice, it is shown that non-white offenders only make up 37% of the total arrests. However, non-white offenders make up 54.3% of those arrested for prostitution and commercialized vice. But it is important to know that as defined by the Victims of Sex Trafficking and Violence Protection Act, anyone under the age of 18 who is induced to engage in a commercial sex act as a sex trafficking victim. So that's what is defined. They're a sex trafficking victim, even if they are quote unquote a willing participant, because they're a minor and they are not able to give consent. So I found that quote from the Youth Involvement in Prostitution article listed down below. With that being said, based on an article, race and gender disparities in the sex trade, in a 2-year review of all suspected human trafficking incidents across the country, 94% of sex trafficking victims were female, 40% were Black, and 24% were Latinx. And based off of general population statistics, these are disproportionate numbers. African Americans make up about 18% of the overall population, but to make up 40% of the overall sex trade is astonishing and just horrifying. And later in the same article, it is stated that, quote, in South Dakota, Native American women represent 40% of the sex trafficking victims, though Native Americans are only 8% of the population, end quote. And that's another horrifying statistic, that minority groups are being targeted. And a lot of this has to do with representation and how they're going to get rid of, or kind of who is going to advocate for them. And it is really sad to see these numbers and know why these numbers are so different from those. Not that anyone deserves to be a victim of this, it's just important to know the statistics on who's being targeted. And youth are also unfairly coerced into participating in sex trafficking, because they can be dubbed as runaways because they are easier to coerce, whether through drugs or through having a mentor, someone who says that they care about them and gives them a place to stay and says that they love them, and then manipulates them into participating in sex acts. So moving on to drugs. Though drugs are highly used amongst youth, it is not as profound of a use in minority youth in comparison to white youth. Statistically, they seem less likely to use drugs or alcohol than white youth, and is still a problem in its own right. With most of the statistical information coming from Chapter 3 of drug use trajectories among minority youth, and that will also be listed down below. So in a 2006 study of persons over the age of 12, persons over the age of 12, it was found that, quote, quote, the proportions having ever smoked cigarettes are 72% for whites and 54.7% for African Americans. The respective proportions for alcohol were 87% for white and 74.6% for African American. Marijuana was 73.6% for white and 37.5% for African American. And then finally, for non-medical use or prescription type psychotherapeutic drugs was 22.6% for white and 12.9% for African Americans, which these statistics in themselves are staggering. The fact that many youth are participating in recreational drug and alcohol use, and these are statistics based off have ever used, so it's not ongoing use targeted specifically. However, they also go into cocaine use and other recreational drugs that overall is staggering to see that youth are participating in. There's also evidence linking in the use of drugs as a coping mechanism while in the sex trade. That's why I felt it was so important to put these two together, because they're often used as a coping mechanism to deal with the abuse, or they're used by the person coercing them into participating as like a manipulation, like you can do this and it'll make you feel good, or they purposely keep them doped up so they're not willing to reach out and look for help. Okay, so quickly, Big Brothers Big Sisters of America is the program that I chose to highlight that like reaches out and helps children who are at risk for both of these offenses. So their mission is Big Brothers and Big Sisters helps children realize their potential and build their futures. We nurture children and strengthen communities, and we couldn't do any of this without you. And this was their mission statement found on the Big Brothers Big Sisters of America website. So who they serve is youth, and they serve any child, but this is primarily used for single or working parent households where they don't have that mentor, that big brother or big sister or parent that kind of can help guide them to making not the right decisions, but making decisions that hopefully would see self-destructive behavior prior to it leading to either of these two circumstances. They mostly get their funding from grants, government programs, and private donors, and that can be found also on the Big Brothers Big Sisters of America page. They have a very positive impact on youth in the community. They are basically a mentor, and they give them someone to go to. That's different than like a parent figure. So this is someone that they can go and confide in without feeling that they are going to get reprimanded or get in trouble. And this adult can help them make the right decisions, either moving forward or like in there by themselves, or get parents and police involved, things such as that. So some of the reform is remembering that these youth are victims and that they need help and care and support. In a lot of circumstances, they are now recognized as victims. However, there have been cases where they have been tried as accessories due to the fact that they will not rat out whoever is coercing them into doing this, or because they are not willing to seek out drug treatment. But in the end, they are victims to the circumstances that they have fallen into. And oftentimes they answer to someone. So as far as sex trafficking goes, they answer to the person who is coercing them to do this. And that person is the only one who's been caring about them. So help them to realize that that's not a healthy relationship, that they do deserve better and that they can get better. And this person does not have to control their lives anymore. And it's also important to remember that you do not have to prosecute sex workers for refusing to testify against their captors, pimps, whoever is coercing them into doing this, forcing them to first come to the realization that they are a victim and then have to go up against the person who victimized them. That should not be a you can help us, or you can be tried against, or you can be his or her. It can be either way, but oftentimes they're either given the choice to testify against their victimizer or to be charged as an accessory. And allowing for drug treatment and therapy for those who need it. Those are some major ways that we can reform and work to helping rehabilitate these youth. And I think it's important to look at all of the aspects that I've talked about today and really realize that this is a horrible thing that's happening to a lot of people, and it's a hard thing to talk about, but it's important to talk about so that we work forward, move forward, and work harder to do things like the Big Brothers and Big Sisters of America and give them someone that they can turn to when they don't think that they have anyone. Thank you guys so much for listening to me, and I can't wait to hear the rest of your guys' projects.